Okay, so now we're going to move on to the colors. The good part about coloring Daredevil is, aside from his face and his billy club, everything's red. So you basically just got to trace around every piece of them, get out your bucket tool, and fill them in red. And then when you're done with the red, you go back and you throw in some darker shading. I believe I use on this one. I don't think I add in any real highlights to this. Just leave it 2 shades of red. And of course there's his face. You got to fill in the fleshy colors and the teeth, because teeth aren't white. And another good thing about Daredevil, his eyes are red too. Everything just red, 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 red. But if you have a good drawing and you have a good base, that doesn't matter, because it just comes together and everything red pops. And as you can tell, I'm struggling to talk about how cool it is to fill in Daredevil red. So why don't we go on another tangent and talk about the 90s when Scott McDaniel took over the Daredevil run. And they went all 90s and they gave Daredevil an armored black and red suit with all these fins on it and shoulder pads and all the good 90s stuff. I honestly don't remember much of the story. I remember one of the covers was really iconic. It was just a white picture of the Empire State Building, I believe, or the Chrysler Building, with a tiny, tiny little Daredevil falling off of it. This is another one of those fall from grace kind of things, where he just realizes that his current suit can't handle the job and he needs something a little tougher to stick up to the criminals he's fighting, because he's just getting his butt kicked all the time. As you can see, all the red is filling in nicely, nice and simply. Now we're going to do the head, and then we'll go back to Scott McDaniel. Even though it's not completely Daredevil related, back in the 90s he had an excellent run on Batman, and then he later moved on to the Nightwing ongoing series, where they added in Bloodhaven and all the lore for Nightwing and his rogue galleries, and helped grow Nightwing into his own man and out of Batman's shadow. And it's another great one if you want to read it. Nightwing kind of parallels Daredevil a lot. Obviously Robin came first, but street level, he's got the batons and the billy clubs. Of course, Nightwing also has Batman's money and resources to go with it. Actually, I think Dick has his own money. His family left him some, and Alfred left him a lot of money when he was killed, and so Dick's doing okay on his own. But right now we're also throwing in the deeper reds. We made a new layer, and that adds a roundness to the figure to add in the shadows, so it's not just all one solid red. We probably could have got away without doing this, because once you throw a texture on it and it all blends in, but it helps, and it's always good to have a little more detail and definition, even if it's just a little more a darker red to balance out the brightness of the other red. Another book I should have reread before getting into this video was another Frank Miller, John Romita Jr., Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. After Miller did Batman Year One and he redefined Batman's origin, which is one of my favorite Batman stories of all time, a few years later, in the 90s, he took on Daredevil. And in Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, it's basically Daredevil's origin, from getting blinded by the ooze. I don't think he brings the turtles into it, but that would have been pretty darn funny. And it's more gritty and street level, and he goes from the death of his father battling Jack Murdock, a boxer killed by a bunch of mobsters, and trying to avenge his father, which goes horribly wrong. He ends up pushing a woman out a window to her death and has to recover from that. It goes through Stick finding him and teaching him how to use his radar senses and the ninja skills and everything that he needs to become Daredevil. It goes through his college years with Elektra and how they met and how their relationship started and how it ended and why she was such an important part of his life. It's a great read, and I would highly recommend that for any Daredevil fan who hasn't read it. It's probably the definitive take on his origin, in my opinion, and it's one of Miller's last great works, because after that he did Sin City, which was fantastic, and then 300, and then things got a little weird and he started directing movies. He co-directed Sin City 2 with Robert Rodriguez, which, while not as good as the first one, was pretty good. And then he directed The Spirit, which I kind of like it, but it is definitely weird, and it looks like it just was ripped out of the pages from Sin City. pretty much black and white movie with spot colors added on, and Samuel L. Jackson and Scarlett Johansson, they play these weird Nazi villains, and there's a scene with Swamp in a toilet seat. It's out there, but it's fun, it's entertaining, and I got the poster at one of the New York Comic Cons. I don't think I have it anymore. I kind of wish I did. It was a really nice, stylish Frank Miller's poster. I also had some Sin City posters from when the book came out, that one of them was huge. It was like a 4-sheet, covered a whole wall. If only I still had those. As you can see, we're still outlining the dark red to give definition and round out the figure a little bit, so it's not just a big block of bright red. And still going, even with some tangents, Daredevil and non-Daredevil related, we still have to go on. Yeah, so back in the late 90s, I was going out with some friends. We were driving around, and we were in, I believe it was Meriden, Connecticut, when we came upon a comic shop. And, you know, whether you like comics or not, if you were with me and we saw a comic shop, we went in. So we went into the comic shop, and comic shops had the wall, and the wall had all the nice, cool, expensive books, the things you only dream you could have when you're a broke kid. And I looked up at the wall, and one of the books they had was Daredevil #1, and they also had a Daredevil #4. And the Daredevil #1 at the time, I think, was $250, and I think they wanted $50 or $75 for the Daredevil #4. And so I asked the guy at the counter, I'm like, is anything you could do with those prices to make it a little better? Because, you know, that was actually fairly affordable. And the guy's like, oh, let me see. So this is just a kid who worked there, wasn't the owner. And apparently the owner gave him a formula of percentages. If you spend so much money, you get so much off and whatnot. And it worked out, whatever the math was, if you bought the #4 and the 1 together, they only wanted $200 for it. Now, I didn't have $200 on me, but my friend Phil was with me, and he goes, I'll buy that for you, but you have to give me all your Spawn figures, because I had quite the impressive collection of Spawn figures at the time. The Max, all those, just tubs full of them. They were all open, nothing sealed, because I always put things on shelves and whatnot. So I'm like, Phil, you got a deal. So Phil handed the man $200, and I walked out of there with a copy of Daredevil #1 and Daredevil #4. That was probably one of the happiest comic collecting days of my life. And then eventually I had a small child, who was awesome, by the way, and he needed money for some field trip thing I didn't have money for, so I ended up selling the Daredevil to pay for that. But don't regret it at all. I had a nice copy of Daredevil 1 for a while, and I will remember that. And eventually I will have another one, because even though the prices have gone up a lot, and the copy that I paid $250 for 20-something years ago will probably cost me $3,000 or $4,000 now, maybe even more, because it was actually a really clean copy. So, but the good thing about Daredevil is he's kind of like the stepchild of Marvel, so while things are more expensive than they were, it's still affordable in comparison, because you try to buy a Spider-Man #1, even a bad one that barely has a cover, and it's going to cost you $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000. So Daredevil's a bargain in comparison. So now we're pretty much blocking in the red for his head. We're leaving the eyes a nice bright red so they pop, and then we're going to have to add in a little bit more and trim it down, because I kind of overdid it a little bit, but that's part of it. And the good thing about digital is you have more control over things. So you could go back and erase something 10 times, and you're not ripping a hole in your paper. And like before, we're going back and we're adding all the fun little dashed lines and definition to round out the figure. Because another good thing about digital, it's really easy to do this stuff in color too. Make the horns pop. And yeah, we're just going to keep going in and cutting in the lines and cutting out and adding in highlights by bringing back the original red underneath the dark red. That's why we made this a new layer, just to make our lives a little easier, so we don't have to keep switching colors all the time. We could just go in with the eraser tool and add in the same lines. And somewhere along the line, I adjusted the stabilization on my pen, thing that seems to be the bane of my existence in these first few drawings since resetting my tablet. And I brought it up to a 9 from a 6, and it seems like it's helping a lot. The lines are a lot cleaner, they're a lot smoother. It's covering up a bunch of my jitter. Well, it's more of a digital jitter, it's not me, because if you notice when you're using an actual pen, whether it be a brush or a dip pen or a rapidograph or some kind of marker, Your lines are fairly steady unless your hands are extremely shaky, but when you move on to a digital tablet, you notice that it exaggerates every movement of your hand. And that's where the stabilization comes in, because it takes away some of the jitterness, kind of like movies when you're filming and the camera's shaking, and then you got the software to stabilize the video. That's what the stabilization does for your pen. So, also, I guess once you hit 50 subscribers, I think I mentioned this in the Spider-Man video, I'll be able to do live streaming. So if any of you are watching this and you would like to see a live stream and chat about the drawings and ask questions while we're doing it, I'd be more than happy to set that up and figure out how to do it all and answer any questions live while we're doing these drawings. Because, you know, it's one thing to work in a vacuum and sitting on a chair watching some TV while drawing Daredevil. It's another thing to be interacting with people and talking about what you're doing and answering questions that I might not think about while I'm doing the narration for these videos. So I think that would be quite helpful if anybody would be interested in hearing something like that. So now we're adding the shading to the face. We're basically just a darker flesh color to pop it in and give definition to the facial structure, the nose, the mouth, the little wrinkles under the eyes, things like that. Just helps to make everything pop. And I can't believe we got this far into the video without mentioning the Daredevil movie from, I believe it was 2003, starring Ben Affleck, who would later go on to be Batman. Probably was a better Batman than he was a Daredevil, but as a Daredevil fan, I liked the movie. I'm an apologist. The director's cut was much better. Michael Clark Duncan was an excellent Kingpin. I think that if the movies carried on and they were more grounded as more modern superhero movies were, he would have been just as regarded as the Kingpin as Vincent D'Onofrio. And then we have Jennifer Gardner. She was Elektra. I mean, she's not the greatest Elektra. She doesn't have that Greek goddess energy to her, but she was good. Jon Favreau is Foggy. You can't go wrong with that. And he's the eternal sidekick of the superhero world. He's also Happy Hogan to Iron Man. And, you know, he directed and brought The Mandalorian to life, so we can't fault him for that. And then, of course, there's Colin Farrell, who played Bullseye. My only disappointment was seeing the movie where he's really upset because Daredevil beat him and he missed. And he goes, "And I want a bloody costume." And he never got his bloody costume. And so that's Daredevil 2003. Could have been better, but it was the early days of superhero movies, and so I think they did pretty good with what they had. So now we're on to the final touches for the color. We're adding in the texture, and I added the swirl behind him to indicate his radar sense, and now, you know, we're adding in a blue background to help with the red pop. I think we end up with more of a teal as we adjust things and make it work, and we got to bring down some of the elements in the background so they don't fight with the elements in the foreground. So we go through a few different colors. My favorite way is, color theory is cool, but you can also just go on your hue and saturation slider till you find something that makes it pop. You can never go wrong with a teal and a red. It's kind of like Christmas. They're complementary colors. You got your reds and your greens, and they always work together. So now we just got to go through a few adjustments here to make everything pop and work with each other. Different saturations, different hues. And once you're happy with that, we move on to the top color because it's too grimy and too yellow and it's filling. We need to take up more space. This one I actually should have used a higher resolution background because it gets a little grainy when I'm done and I get it to a place where I like it. Yeah, and back to the Daredevil movie, the Elektra sequel. Not so good. And I know that Ben Affleck played Daredevil and he has a thing for superheroes, but I always thought that Matt Damon had a better look for Daredevil. He had the blonde hair. He just has more of a Matt Damon. He has more of a Matt Murdock look to him. So I think that was a missed opportunity there. And back to Daredevil, we pretty much got the colors down, and we have to go in, add a signature, of course. Can't not have your signature. I have a little fm3 logo that I usually use on things, and I gotta find it. I had a hard drive crash, so I lost a lot of art, but we'll start using that as a signature. I have it in the thumbnails for these. I just haven't pulled it out for the drawings yet. And here I decided we needed a little bit more texture, so I found this cool copyright-free, it's the Ben-Day dots, kind of like on the Spider-Man with the little dots, except it's a background texture. And so when you bring it over, you can see the dots as I enlarge it. And I thought that added just the right amount of grit that I was looking for the drawing. So you gotta resize it, get it where you want it to go. Gotta cut Daredevil off because we don't want the dots on him. We just want the dots in the background. So we have to select around and delete them from the foreground figure. Plus the dots help to push the background to the back, and that helps a lot. Just got to get in there and get every nook and cranny, because if you miss one, then the dots are missing in a spot and everything just kind of looks weird. So you got to make sure you hit all the right spots before you delete it. And then obviously I forgot to invert the pattern, so here we go, take two, delete, and there we go, Daredevil pops. The background's pushed to the back by the shading and the grayness of the dots. And I can't stress how cool the dots are. If you want to add texture to something, or you want to add a cool type of vintage shading, the Ben-Day dots are the way to go. I have a bunch of brushes from True Grit Texture Supply, I believe they're called, and they work great for these kind of things. Those are the ones I use in the Spider-Man drawing the last time. And they also have color ones, so you can mix your colors to get that vintage comic look with the colors. We'll probably use those in one of the upcoming drawings, because that's a really cool thing to do, and you get that really nice vintage look. So now we just got to finish going through whitening up the ropes, and I also got to delete the dots from the ropes, but we'll get to that in a minute. And everything here is coming to an end, because once we finish this up, we pretty much got to finish drawing. And I hope everybody stuck around to the end. And I'm gonna break these videos into pieces, so we're gonna have a pencil section, an ink section, and a color section. So if you don't want to stick around for the whole thing, or you're just interested in the inks, or you're just interested in the color, we're gonna set it up so you could just watch those sections without going through the whole video. And I'll probably also mark these videos up with timestamps so that you could just go to the section you want. And here we go, there's the finished Daredevil drawing. I thank you for sticking around, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great week.